Imagine a kingdom plunged into darkness, where evil runs rampant and hope seems to have vanished. Now picture a boy, so young he can barely tie his own shoes, suddenly thrust onto the throne and tasked with carrying the weight of an entire nation on his small shoulders. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Yet this is exactly how the incredible journey of Josiah begins. The youngest king, and surprisingly, one of the greatest that Israel has ever known. In a world where power often corrupts and leaders frequently falter, Josiah's story stands out as a beacon of hope and transformation. At just 8 years old, he inherited a kingdom steeped in idolatry and injustice, the legacy of generations of unfaithful rulers. But against all odds, this child king would grow to become a reformer whose impact would echo through the centuries. From the dusty scrolls of ancient texts to the grand halls of the temple, Josiah's tale is one of courage, faith, and unwavering commitment to what is right. It's a story that challenges our preconceptions about age and wisdom, about the power of one individual to change the course of history. As we delve into the life of this remarkable young ruler, prepare to be inspired, challenged, and perhaps even transformed. For in the story of Josiah, we find not just a historical account, but a timeless lesson on leadership, faith, and the extraordinary potential that lies within each of us to make a difference in our world. Are you ready to embark on this journey through time, to witness a young boy's transformation into a king who would shake the very foundations of his kingdom? Then let's turn back the pages of history and discover the unforgettable story of Josiah, the boy who became king and the king who changed everything. In the annals of history, few stories captivate the imagination quite like that of Josiah, the boy king who ascended to the throne of Judah at the tender age of 8. His tale is one of transformation, not just of a young boy into a man, but of an entire nation pulled back from the brink of spiritual and moral collapse. To understand the magnitude of Josiah's story, we must first paint a picture of the world he was born into. The kingdom of Judah, once glorious under the reigns of David and Solomon, had fallen far from its former splendor. For generations, the land had been ruled by kings who did evil in the sight of the Lord, leading the people into idolatry and away from the covenant their forefathers had made with God. Josiah's own grandfather, Manasseh, and his father, Amon, were among the worst offenders. Under their rule, pagan altars dotted the landscape, the temple of the Lord lay in ruins, and the very law of Moses, the foundation of Israel's relationship with God, had been lost and forgotten. It was a time of spiritual darkness where the worship of foreign gods had replaced devotion to the one true God. Into this world of spiritual decay and moral corruption, young Josiah was born. His birth didn't herald hope or change. If anything, as the son of wicked King Amon, he seemed destined to continue the destructive patterns of his forebears. Who could have imagined that this child, born into a lineage of unfaithful kings, would become the catalyst for one of the most significant religious reformations in Israel's history? Josiah's story is more than just a tale of personal transformation. It's a narrative that speaks to the heart of leadership, demonstrating how one individual's commitment to righteousness can impact an entire nation. It challenges our assumptions about age and wisdom, showing that even a child can be an instrument of divine purpose when yielded to God's will. As we delve deeper into Josiah's life, we'll witness a journey of discovery, both of ancient truths long buried and of the transformative power of obedience to God. We'll see a young king grappling with the sins of his fathers, making bold decisions that would reshape the spiritual landscape of Judah. Through his story, we'll explore themes of courage, faith, and the sometimes painful process of national renewal. But Josiah's tale is not just a relic of ancient history. It holds profound lessons for our modern world, challenging us to consider the impact one person can have when they stand for truth in a culture of compromise. It invites us to reflect on our own lives and the legacy we wish to leave. So as we turn the pages of this ancient story, prepare to be inspired, challenged, and perhaps even transformed. For in the life of Josiah, we find a timeless testament to the power of faith, the importance of rediscovering our spiritual roots, and the extraordinary potential that lies within each of us to effect change in our world. To fully appreciate the significance of Josiah's reign, we must first understand the complex geopolitical landscape of his time. The young king ascended to the throne during a period of significant upheaval in the ancient Near East, a time when long-standing power structures were crumbling and new forces were rising to take their place. For generations, the mighty Assyrian Empire had dominated the region, its influence stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Assyria's brutal military campaigns and efficient administration had kept smaller kingdoms like Judah in a state of fearful submission. However, by the time of Josiah's birth, this once invincible empire was showing signs of decline. Internal strife, overextension, and constant rebellions from subjugated peoples had begun to weaken Assyria's grip on power. The empire that had seemed eternal was now struggling to maintain control over its vast territories. This decline created a power vacuum in the region, and two major powers were poised to fill it: Egypt to the south and Babylon to the east. Egypt, under the leadership of the 26th dynasty, was experiencing a resurgence. The pharaohs, seeking to reclaim their former glory, began to look northward, eager to exploit Assyria's weakness and extend their influence into the Levant. Their ambitions would play a crucial role in the latter part of Josiah's reign. Meanwhile, to the east, Babylon was rapidly ascending as a formidable power. Under the leadership of ambitious kings, the Neo-Babylonian Empire was consolidating its strength, ready to challenge Assyria's dominance. The Babylonians, with their allies the Medes, would eventually deliver the death blow to Assyria, forever changing the balance of power in the region. Caught in the middle of these shifting alliances and power struggles was the small kingdom of Judah. Situated at the crossroads of these great empires, Judah occupied a precarious position. Its territory, while not extensive, was strategically vital, controlling important trade routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia. For much of its history, Judah had been a vassal state, paying tribute first to Assyria and then to Egypt to maintain a semblance of independence. The kingdom's leaders often found themselves walking a diplomatic tightrope, trying to navigate between the demands of more powerful neighbors without being crushed in the process. It was into this volatile political climate that young Josiah was thrust as king. The challenges he faced were not merely internal. He had to guide his nation through a period of intense international uncertainty. The decisions he would make regarding alliances and loyalties would have far-reaching consequences for his people. Josiah's reign coincided with a brief window of opportunity for Judah. As Assyria's power waned, and before Babylon fully asserted its dominance, there was a period where smaller kingdoms like Judah could assert more independence. This geopolitical reality would play a crucial role in enabling Josiah's reforms and his efforts to expand Judah's influence. However, this period of relative freedom was precarious and short-lived. The rising powers of Egypt and Babylon would soon clash, with devastating consequences for the nations caught between them. Josiah's tragic end at Megiddo, in a confrontation with Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, would be a stark reminder of the dangerous game of international politics in which Judah was embroiled. Understanding this complex geopolitical backdrop is crucial to appreciating the full scope of Josiah's achievements. His religious reforms and national renewal didn't occur in a vacuum, but against a backdrop of international tension and shifting power dynamics. That he was able to implement such sweeping changes and maintain Judah's independence for as long as he did is a testament to his skill as a leader and the divine favor that the Bible attributes to his reign. As we delve deeper into Josiah's story, we'll see how this young king navigated these treacherous waters, balancing the spiritual renewal of his nation with the practical realities of international politics. His reign would represent a last golden age for Judah before the storms of conquest and exile would forever change the fate of his people. The story of Josiah begins in the shadows of a troubled dynasty. Born into the royal household of Judah, Josiah's early years were far from the idyllic childhood one might expect for a prince. His grandfather, Manasseh, had ruled Judah for 55 years, a reign marked by unprecedented wickedness. The Bible paints a grim picture of Manasseh's rule, describing how he led the people into idolatry, even going so far as to sacrifice his own son to pagan gods. Josiah's father, Amon, followed in Manasseh's footsteps. His brief 2-year reign was characterized by the same evils that had plagued Judah under Manasseh. The spiritual and moral decay of the nation seemed to have reached its nadir. It was into this atmosphere of corruption and apostasy that Josiah was born in 648 BC. The young prince's early years must have been tumultuous. Palace intrigues, the constant threat of assassination, which would eventually claim his father's life, and the pervasive influence of pagan practices would have been the backdrop to his childhood. Yet, somehow, in this environment so hostile to righteousness, a seed of faith took root in the young boy's heart. Tragedy struck when Josiah was only 6 years old. His father, King Amon, fell victim to a conspiracy within his own household. The Bible recounts, and the servants of Amon conspired against him and killed the king in his own house. In the wake of this assassination, the people of Judah rose up, executed the conspirators, and in a surprising turn of events, placed the young Josiah on the throne. At the tender age of 8, Josiah became king of Judah. The biblical account is strikingly matter-of-fact about this extraordinary situation. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. One can only imagine the mixture of confusion, fear, and perhaps even excitement that the young boy must have felt as the weight of the crown was placed upon his head. The challenges facing the child king were monumental. Judah was a nation in crisis, having strayed far from the ways of God under the leadership of Josiah's predecessors. The temple lay in disrepair, idolatry was rampant, and the law of Moses had been all but forgotten. How could a child, barely old enough to understand the complexities of kingship, hope to address these deep-seated issues? The answer lies in part with those who surrounded the young king in his early years. While the Bible doesn't provide extensive details about Josiah's education or early influences, we can infer that there were still faithful individuals within the royal court who played a crucial role in shaping the young king's character and worldview. Key figures like Hilkiah the high priest and Shaphan the scribe, who would later play pivotal roles in Josiah's reforms, were likely among those who guided the boy during his formative years. These God-fearing men must have seen in Josiah an opportunity to steer the nation back towards righteousness, carefully nurturing the young king's nascent faith and imparting to him the wisdom of Israel's ancient traditions. As Josiah grew, so did his understanding of his role and the state of his kingdom. The Bible tells us that in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of David his father. This statement, made when Josiah was 16, marks the beginning of his personal spiritual journey, one that would have profound implications for the entire nation. During these early years, while Josiah was too young to govern effectively, the affairs of state were likely managed by a regency council. This period of behind-the-scenes leadership allowed Josiah time to learn, to observe, and to develop the convictions that would later fuel his reforms. It's remarkable to consider how different Josiah's path was from that of his father and grandfather. Born into a lineage of wickedness, he could easily have continued the destructive patterns set by his predecessors. Instead, whether through divine intervention, the influence of godly advisors, or a combination of both, Josiah chose a different way. As we reflect on Josiah's childhood and ascension to the throne, we're reminded of the potential for change that resides in every generation. Josiah's story challenges us to consider how the seeds of transformation can take root even in the most unlikely circumstances. It invites us to ponder the impact that positive influences can have on young lives, and the importance of nurturing faith and character from an early age. Josiah's early years set the stage for the dramatic reforms that were to come. From this unlikely beginning, a child king born into a legacy of wickedness would emerge one of Judah's greatest monarchs, a leader whose passion for God would spark a national revival and leave an indelible mark on the history of his people. As Josiah entered his teenage years, a remarkable transformation began to take place. The Bible tells us that in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of David his father. This simple statement marks the beginning of a spiritual journey that would not only change Josiah's life, but the entire course of Judah's history. At 16, an age when many young people are just beginning to question and explore their beliefs, Josiah made a conscious decision to seek after God. This wasn't the God of his immediate ancestors, the foreign deities his father and grandfather had worshipped, but the God of David, the greatest king in Israel's history. This choice suggests that Josiah had been exposed to the stories of Israel's glorious past and was inspired to reconnect with that heritage. The decision to seek God was not an easy one for Josiah. He faced numerous challenges in this spiritual pursuit. The kingdom he inherited was steeped in idolatry. Pagan altars dotted the landscape, the temple of the Lord lay in disrepair, and the law of Moses had been lost and forgotten. The young king was swimming against a strong current of established practices and beliefs. Moreover, Josiah had to contend with the influence of those who had prospered under the old system. Priests of false gods, corrupt officials, and those who benefited from the status quo would have resisted any attempt to change the religious and social order. The young king's commitment to seeking God would have put him at odds with many powerful figures in his court. Despite these challenges, Josiah persevered in his quest. We can imagine the young king poring over ancient scrolls, engaging in long discussions with the few remaining faithful priests and prophets, and spending hours in prayer and contemplation. This period of seeking was crucial in shaping Josiah's character and preparing him for the reforms he would later implement. As Josiah grew in his understanding and commitment to God, he began to see his role as king in a new light. He wasn't just a political leader, but a spiritual one as well, responsible for guiding his people back to the covenant relationship with God that had been neglected for so long. This spiritual awakening had a profound impact on Josiah's personal development. The Bible describes him as doing what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in all the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. This steadfastness of character, unusual for one so young, would serve him well in the challenging years ahead. Josiah's journey of faith wasn't just a private matter. It began to influence his public actions as well. The Bible records that, in the 12th year of his reign, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, Asherah poles and idols. This marks the beginning of Josiah's public reforms, initiated when he was just 20 years old. These early reforms were likely met with mixed reactions. Some, longing for a return to the true worship of God, would have welcomed these changes. Others, comfortable with the existing religious practices, would have resisted. Josiah's actions required not just devotion, but courage and conviction as well. As we consider Josiah's spiritual journey, we're reminded of the transformative power of seeking God. This young king, born into a legacy of wickedness, chose a different path. His story challenges us to consider our own spiritual journeys and the impact they have on our actions and the world around us. Josiah's early years of seeking God laid the foundation for the more comprehensive reforms that were to come. They represent a crucial period of preparation, both for Josiah personally and for the nation of Judah. The seeds of revival were being sown, setting the stage for one of the most significant periods of spiritual renewal in Israel's history. In Josiah, we see a powerful example of how personal faith can lead to public action. His journey from a boy born into a corrupt dynasty to a young man passionately pursuing God serves as an inspiration and a challenge. It reminds us that no matter our background or circumstances, we all have the potential to seek truth and to let that truth transform not just our lives, but the lives of those around us. As Josiah's personal faith deepened, it catalyzed a series of sweeping reforms that would transform the religious landscape of Judah. These reforms, initiated when Josiah was in his early 20s, represented one of the most comprehensive attempts to purify worship and return the nation to covenant faithfulness in Israel's history. The reforms began with a systematic purging of idolatrous elements from the land. The Bible provides a detailed account of Josiah's actions. He ordered the altars of the Baals to be torn down. He cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them. He broke down the Asherah poles and the carved idols and the cast images. He reduced them to powder and scattered it over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. This was no small undertaking. Generations of idolatrous practices had left their mark on the landscape of Judah. Pagan shrines and altars were commonplace, and their destruction would have been a massive logistical effort. Moreover, it was a direct challenge to deeply entrenched religious and cultural practices. Josiah's reforms weren't limited to Judah alone. Taking advantage of the power vacuum left by Assyria's decline, he extended his purification efforts into the territories of the former northern kingdom of Israel. This bold move demonstrated Josiah's vision of reuniting all of Israel under true worship of Yahweh. One of the most significant aspects of Josiah's reforms was the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. Years of neglect under previous kings had left the house of God in a state of disrepair. Josiah ordered a complete renovation of the temple, allocating significant resources to the project. It was during this renovation that a momentous discovery was made. Hilkiah the high priest found the Book of the Law in the temple. This discovery was a turning point in Josiah's reforms. When the book was read to him, Josiah tore his robes in anguish, recognizing how far the nation had strayed from God's commands. The finding of the Book of the Law led to the most profound phase of Josiah's reforms. He gathered all the people, from the highest officials to the common folk, and read the entire book to them. Then, in a solemn ceremony, he renewed the covenant between God and the people, pledging to follow the Lord and keep his commands. This covenant renewal was followed by the most celebrated Passover in generations. The Bible states, "Neither in the days of the judges who led Israel, nor in the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah had any such Passover been observed." This Passover symbolized the nation's return to its roots and its recommitment to the God of their ancestors. Josiah's reforms were comprehensive, touching every aspect of religious life in Judah. He removed pagan priests from office, destroyed centers of idolatrous worship, and reinstituted proper temple practices. He even destroyed the altar at Bethel, fulfilling a prophecy made hundreds of years earlier. The impact of these reforms was profound. For the first time in generations, the people of Judah were reintroduced to the true worship of Yahweh. The law of Moses, long forgotten, was once again central to the nation's life. The corrupt religious practices that had led the people astray were forcefully eliminated. However, it's important to note that while Josiah's reforms were extensive, they were primarily top-down initiatives. The Bible suggests that while the people complied with Josiah's directives, the deep heart change necessary for lasting revival may not have occurred universally. Nevertheless, Josiah's religious reforms stand as a testament to what can be accomplished when a leader is fully committed to following God. They demonstrate the potential for national renewal and the power of returning to foundational truths. As we reflect on Josiah's reforms, we're challenged to consider our own lives and societies. What idols might we need to tear down? What forgotten truths need to be rediscovered? Josiah's story reminds us that genuine reform often requires bold action and a willingness to challenge the status quo in pursuit of truth and righteousness. Josiah's reforms extended far beyond the religious sphere, profoundly impacting the social and economic fabric of Judah. As the young king deepened his understanding of the law of Moses, he recognized that true spiritual renewal must be accompanied by social justice and economic reforms. The book of Deuteronomy, likely a significant part of the rediscovered law, contains numerous instructions about social responsibility and economic justice. Josiah took these commands seriously, implementing policies that reflected God's concern for the vulnerable and the equitable distribution of resources. One of Josiah's primary focuses was on improving the judicial system. The law of Moses emphasized the importance of just judges who wouldn't pervert justice or show partiality. Josiah appointed judges throughout the land, charging them to judge fairly and without corruption. He likely established or reinvigorated local courts to ensure that justice was accessible to all, not just the wealthy or powerful. The king also took steps to protect the most vulnerable members of society. The law placed special emphasis on caring for widows, orphans, and foreigners. Josiah implemented policies to ensure these groups were not exploited or neglected. This might have included setting up systems for food distribution, as suggested by the gleaning laws in Deuteronomy, or establishing protections against those who might take advantage of the vulnerable. Economically, Josiah's reign saw significant prosperity. The restoration of the temple and the reinstitution of religious festivals would have stimulated the economy of Jerusalem. Pilgrims coming to the city for worship would have brought trade and commerce. Moreover, Josiah's expansion of Judah's influence into the former northern kingdom likely opened up new trade routes and economic opportunities. The relative peace during his reign would have allowed for increased agricultural production and trade. Josiah also reformed the taxation system, ensuring it was more equitable and less burdensome on the poor. The previous corrupt systems, which often enriched officials at the expense of the common people, were replaced with more just practices based on the principles found in the law. The king's commitment to social justice extended to labor practices as well. The law of Moses included provisions for the fair treatment of workers, including slaves, and it's likely that Josiah enforced these regulations. This would have included ensuring that workers were paid fairly and promptly, and that the Sabbath rest was observed. Josiah's reforms also had a significant impact on education. With the rediscovery of the law, there was likely a renewed emphasis on teaching the scriptures to the people. This may have led to the establishment of schools or the expansion of the role of Levites in educating the populace about the law. The cultural impact of Josiah's reforms was profound. There was likely a renaissance in religious music and poetry, with new psalms being composed and older ones rediscovered. The arts, long influenced by pagan practices, were reoriented towards the worship of Yahweh. However, it's important to note that these reforms, while extensive, faced challenges. Centuries of corrupt practices couldn't be overturned overnight. There were likely those who resisted the changes, particularly those who had benefited from the previous system. Moreover, the international political situation remained precarious. Josiah had to balance his internal reforms with the realities of existing in a volatile region dominated by larger powers. His ability to implement such sweeping changes is a testament to his political skill as well as his spiritual conviction. Josiah's social and economic reforms demonstrate the holistic nature of true spiritual revival. They remind us that faith should impact every aspect of society, from the halls of power to the daily lives of ordinary people. His efforts to align Judah's social and economic practices with the principles of God's law provide a powerful model of leadership driven by spiritual conviction and a commitment to justice. As we reflect on this aspect of Josiah's reign, we're challenged to consider how our own faith should impact our engagement with social and economic issues. Josiah's example encourages us to seek comprehensive transformation, not just personal piety, and to work towards creating societies that reflect God's concern for justice, equity, and the well-being of all people. The reforms initiated by Josiah had a profound impact on the cultural and religious landscape of Judah, sparking a renaissance in literature, art, and spiritual practices. This period of renewal touched every aspect of the nation's cultural life, from the grand halls of the temple to the homes of ordinary people. One of the most significant cultural developments during Josiah's reign was the renewed emphasis on the written word, particularly the scriptures. The rediscovery of the Book of the Law not only drove the religious reforms, but also likely sparked a broader interest in preserving and studying ancient texts. This period may have seen the beginning of more systematic efforts to collect, copy, and compile the various writings that would eventually form the Hebrew Bible. The Book of Psalms, Israel's ancient hymnal, likely saw significant development during this time. While many psalms predated Josiah, his reign may have seen the composition of new psalms celebrating the renewal of the covenant and the restoration of true worship. Existing psalms may have been rediscovered and given new prominence in temple worship. The 119th Psalm, with its elaborate acrostic structure and focus on the beauty and importance of God's law, may reflect the spiritual ethos of Josiah's time. Similarly, the wisdom literature of Israel may have flourished during this period. Books like Proverbs, which emphasize practical godliness and wise living, align well with Josiah's efforts to implement God's law in everyday life. The renewed focus on the law of Moses would have naturally led to increased interest in wisdom and instruction. The prophetic literature also played a crucial role during Josiah's reign. Prophets like Jeremiah, Zephaniah, and possibly the young Ezekiel were active during this time. Their writings, while often containing warnings of judgment, also reflected the hope and possibility for renewal that Josiah's reforms represented. The fact that their prophecies were preserved suggests a culture that valued and respected prophetic voices. In the realm of visual arts, Josiah's reforms would have had a significant impact. The destruction of idols and pagan symbols necessitated a reimagining of artistic expression. Artists who had previously created images for pagan worship now had to redirect their talents towards adorning the restored temple and creating art that honored Yahweh without violating the prohibition against graven images. This may have led to innovations in abstract design, calligraphy, and symbolic representation. Music, always a central part of Israelite worship, likely experienced a revival under Josiah. The restoration of proper temple worship would have included the reinstatement of Levitical choirs and musicians. New songs may have been composed to celebrate the renewal of the covenant, while ancient hymns were rediscovered and given new life. The joyous celebration of the Passover mentioned in the biblical account surely involved elaborate musical performances. Architecture and craftsmanship also flourished during this period. The renovation of the temple would have required skilled artisans working with various materials: wood, stone, precious metals. This project likely stimulated a revival of traditional Israelite craftsmanship, skills that may have been neglected during the years of spiritual decline. Education saw significant development under Josiah. The need to teach the rediscovered law to the people probably led to more formalized systems of instruction. The role of the Levites as teachers may have been expanded, and local synagogues, if they existed at this early date, may have become centers of learning as well as worship. The cultural impact of Josiah's reforms extended to daily life as well. The rejection of pagan practices and the renewed emphasis on God's law would have influenced everything from dietary habits to family structures to business practices. The rhythm of life would have been reshaped around the biblical festivals and the observance of the Sabbath. However, it's important to note that this cultural renewal, while significant, was not universal or without resistance. The prophets active during this time indicate that there were still those who clung to old ways or only superficially complied with the reforms. The deep-rooted nature of some cultural practices meant that change was often slow and incomplete. Nevertheless, the cultural and religious renaissance under Josiah was remarkable. It demonstrated the power of rediscovering foundational truths and the potential for spiritual renewal to spark creativity and cultural flourishing. Josiah's reign showed how a return to divine principles could rejuvenate not just religious practices, but an entire cultural ethos. As we reflect on this aspect of Josiah's reforms, we're reminded of the profound impact that spiritual renewal can have on culture. It challenges us to consider how our own spiritual convictions shape our cultural contributions, and how a return to foundational truths might spark new creativity and cultural expression in our own time. The reign of Josiah was not only marked by his own leadership, but also by the significant influence of the prophets of his time. These prophets, particularly Jeremiah and Zephaniah, played crucial roles in shaping the spiritual landscape of Judah during this period of reform and renewal. Jeremiah, often called the Weeping Prophet, began his ministry in the 13th year of Josiah's reign. His call to prophetic office coincided with the early stages of Josiah's reforms, and his message both supported and challenged the king's efforts. Jeremiah's prophecies provide valuable insight into the spiritual condition of Judah during this time. Initially, Jeremiah's message aligned closely with Josiah's reforms. He called the people to return to the covenant with God, denouncing idolatry and social injustice. His early prophecies, recorded in the first few chapters of the book bearing his name, echo the themes of Josiah's reformation: a call to repentance, a return to the ways of God, and a rejection of false gods. However, as time went on, Jeremiah's message became increasingly critical. While he supported the external reforms implemented by Josiah, he saw that for many people, the change was only superficial. In Jeremiah 3:10 he laments, "In spite of all this, her unfaithful sister Judah did not return to me with all her heart, but only in pretense." This insight suggests that while Josiah's reforms were extensive, they didn't always penetrate to the heart level of the people. Jeremiah's relationship with Josiah appears to have been generally positive. The king's reforms created an environment where Jeremiah could preach freely, at least initially. However, the prophet's increasingly dire warnings about the future and his insistence on internal transformation, rather than just external compliance, may have created some tension. Zephaniah, another prophet active during Josiah's reign, was likely a contemporary of the young Jeremiah. His lineage is traced back 4 generations to King Hezekiah, making him a relative of Josiah. This royal connection may have given him unique access and influence in the court. Zephaniah's prophecies complement Josiah's reforms. He forcefully condemns idolatry and social injustice, themes that align closely with the king's efforts. His call for repentance and his warnings of judgment likely provided spiritual backing for Josiah's more practical reforms. Interestingly, Zephaniah's prophecies will contain messages of hope and restoration. He speaks of a future time when God will purify the lips of the peoples, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him shoulder to shoulder, to Zephaniah 3, verse 9. This vision of universal worship may have inspired Josiah's efforts to extend his reforms beyond the borders of Judah. The relationship between Josiah and these prophets was likely complex. On one hand, their messages provided divine validation for his reforms. Their calls for repentance and renewal aligned with his efforts to purge idolatry and restore true worship. Josiah, unlike many kings before and after him, seems to have respected and heeded the words of the prophets. On the other hand, the prophets' messages also presented challenges. Their insistence on heart-level change and their warnings of future judgment may have been difficult for Josiah to fully reconcile with his reform efforts. The fact that both Jeremiah and Zephaniah continued to warn of coming judgment, even as Josiah implemented his reforms, suggests that they saw limitations in what the king could accomplish. It's worth noting that other prophets may have been active during this time as well. Nahum and Habakkuk, while not explicitly linked to Josiah's reign in Scripture, may have ministered during this period. Their messages, dealing with God's judgment on the nations and the challenge of faith in difficult times, would have added to the rich prophetic tapestry of the era. The presence of these prophets during Josiah's reign serves as a reminder of the crucial role that prophetic voices play in times of reform and renewal. They provided spiritual insight, called for genuine repentance, and kept the focus on God's ultimate purposes even as practical reforms were being implemented. As we consider the interplay between Josiah and the prophets of his time, we're reminded of the importance of leaders being open to prophetic voices, those who can see beyond the immediate and call for deeper, more lasting change. It challenges us to consider how we respond to voices that affirm our efforts while also pushing us towards more profound transformation. The prophets of Josiah's time left a lasting legacy, their words preserved in Scripture to guide and challenge future generations. Their ministry during this pivotal period in Judah's history provides a model for how spiritual leaders can work alongside political reformers, supporting positive change while always calling for a deeper, more genuine response to God. To fully appreciate the significance of Josiah's reign, it's illuminating to compare him with other notable kings in Israel's history, particularly David and Solomon. This comparison not only highlights Josiah's unique qualities, but also helps us understand why he is considered one of the greatest kings of Israel. David, often seen as the benchmark for Israelite kingship, shares several similarities with Josiah. Both came to the throne at a young age and faced significant challenges in uniting and reforming the nation. Like David, Josiah showed a deep, personal commitment to God that informed his leadership. The Bible often uses the phrase, "walked in the ways of his father David," to describe good kings, and Josiah epitomized this ideal. However, there are also notable differences. While David was a warrior king who expanded Israel's territory through conquest, Josiah's expansion was more focused on spiritual influence, extending his reforms into the former northern kingdom. Unlike David, who had significant moral failings, particularly the incident with Bathsheba, the Bible records no such lapses for Josiah. In this respect, Josiah's reign represents a pure embodiment of godly kingship. Solomon, known for his wisdom and the construction of the first temple, provides another interesting point of comparison. Like Solomon, Josiah invested heavily in the temple, albeit in restoration rather than initial construction. Both kings saw periods of great prosperity and peace during their reigns. However, the contrast between Josiah and Solomon is perhaps even more striking than the similarities. While Solomon's reign ended with him turning to idolatry and oppressing the people with heavy taxes and forced labor, Josiah's reign was characterized by a consistent commitment to God and efforts to relieve burdens on the people. Josiah's reforms aimed to undo much of the idolatrous influence that had entered Israel, partly due to Solomon's compromises. What sets Josiah apart from both David and Solomon, and indeed most other kings of Israel and Judah, is the comprehensive nature of his reforms. While other good kings like Hezekiah had implemented religious reforms, none had done so as thoroughly or extensively as Josiah. His reforms touched every aspect of national life, from religious practices to social structures to international relations. The Bible's assessment of Josiah is remarkably positive. In 2 Kings 23:25 we read, "Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him, who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, in accordance with all the law of Moses." This evaluation places Josiah above even David and Solomon in terms of his wholehearted devotion to God and obedience to the law. Several factors contribute to this high estimation of Josiah. 1. His young age when he began to seek God, demonstrating unusual spiritual maturity. 2. The comprehensive nature of his reforms, which went beyond superficial changes to attempt a complete national renewal. 3. His rediscovery and recommitment to the law of Moses, recentering the nation on its covenant obligations. 4. His celebration of the Passover, described as unparalleled since the time of the Judges. 5. His personal integrity and consistency, with no recorded moral failings. However, it's important to note that Josiah's reign, for all its positives, did not ultimately prevent the judgment that came upon Judah. The reforms, while extensive, did not penetrate deeply enough into the hearts of the people to create lasting change. This sobering reality adds a note of tragedy to Josiah's story and reminds us of the limitations of even the best human leadership. In comparing Josiah to other kings, we see a leader who combined the best qualities of his predecessors while avoiding many of their pitfalls. He demonstrated David's heart for God, Solomon's commitment to the temple, and a reforming zeal that surpassed both. Yet his story also serves as a reminder that even the most righteous leader cannot force internal change in his people. Josiah's reign stands as a high watermark in the history of Israelite kingship, a final flowering of godly leadership before the Babylonian exile. His example challenges us to consider what wholehearted devotion to God looks like in leadership, and how personal integrity and commitment to truth can impact an entire society. As we reflect on Josiah in comparison to other kings, we're reminded of the potential for godly leadership to bring about significant positive change, while also recognizing the ultimate need for heart-level transformation that goes beyond what any human leader can accomplish. The tragic end of Josiah's reign stands in stark contrast to the righteousness and reforms that characterized his life. This final chapter of his story is both perplexing and profoundly moving, serving as a sobering reminder of the complexities of leadership and the often unpredictable nature of human destiny. In 609 BC, after nearly 31 years of rule, Josiah's reign came to an abrupt and violent end on the plains of Megiddo. The geopolitical landscape had shifted dramatically. The once mighty Assyrian Empire was in its death throes, and Egypt under Pharaoh Necho II was marching north to aid the Assyrians against the rising power of Babylon. The biblical account in 2 Chronicles 35:20-24 provides the details of this fateful event. After all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates, and Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. But Necho sent messengers to him, saying, "What quarrel is there, king of Judah, between you and me? It is not you I am attacking at this time, but the house with which I am at war. God has told me to hurry, so stop opposing God who is with me, or he will destroy you." Josiah, however, would not turn away from him, but disguised himself to engage him in battle. He would not listen to what Necho had said at God's command, but went to fight him on the plain of Megiddo. Archers shot King Josiah, and he told his officers, "Take me away, I am badly wounded." So they took him out of his chariot, put him in his other chariot, and brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. This account raises several perplexing questions. Why did Josiah, a king known for his wisdom and godliness, choose to intervene in a conflict that did not directly involve him? Why did he disregard the warning from Necho, which the text suggests came from God? And how are we to reconcile this seemingly rash action with the character of the king we've come to know through his reforms? Several theories have been proposed to explain Josiah's actions. 1. Political ambition. Some scholars suggest that Josiah, emboldened by his successful reforms and the power vacuum left by Assyria's decline, sought to assert Judah's independence and expand its influence. 2. Loyalty to Babylon. Others propose that Josiah had formed an alliance with Babylon and was acting to hinder Egypt's efforts to aid Assyria. 3. Misguided zeal. It's possible that Josiah, in his commitment to purging the land of foreign influence, saw Egypt's passage through Judah's territory as a threat to the nation's spiritual purity. 4. Divine test. Some interpret this event as a test of Josiah's faith, similar to Hezekiah's reception of the Babylonian envoys. Regardless of the reason, the outcome was tragic. Josiah, disguised perhaps to avoid being a target or to personally lead the charge, was mortally wounded by archers. The great reformer king who had led a spiritual revival in generations died as a result of what appears to be a military miscalculation. The impact of Josiah's death on the nation was profound. 2 Chronicles 35, verse 24 to 25 recounts, "He was buried in the tombs of his ancestors, and all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for him." Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah, and to this day all the male and female singers commemorate Josiah in the laments. These became a tradition in Israel and are written in the laments. The depth of mourning described here indicates the high regard in which Josiah was held. The composition of laments by Jeremiah, which became part of the nation's tradition, speaks to the lasting impact of Josiah's life and the sense of loss felt at his untimely death. Josiah's death marked the beginning of the end for the kingdom of Judah. His successors would rule for only a short time before the Babylonian exile, and none would match his righteousness or the extent of his reforms. In many ways, Josiah's reign represented the last golden age of Judah before the long night of exile. The tragic end of Josiah serves as a poignant reminder of human fallibility, even for the most righteous of leaders. It challenges us to consider how even well-intentioned actions can have unforeseen and devastating consequences. At the same time, it invites us to reflect on how a life well lived can leave a lasting impact, even when it ends in unexpected tragedy. Ultimately, Josiah's death, while tragic, does not negate the positive impact of his reign. His reforms, his devotion to God, and his efforts to lead his people in righteousness left an indelible mark on the history of Israel. His life and death continue to provoke thought and inspire faith, reminding us of the complex interplay between human choice, divine purpose, and the unpredictable currents of history. The death of Josiah marked a turning point in the history of Judah, initiating a rapid decline that would culminate in the Babylonian exile. The aftermath of his reign reveals the fragility of the reforms he had implemented and the deep-seated issues that persisted in Judean society despite his best efforts. Immediately following Josiah's death, the people of Judah took matters into their own hands. According to 2 Kings 23:30, Josiah's servants brought his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz son of Josiah and anointed him and made him king in place of his father. Jehoahaz, also known as Shallum, was not Josiah's eldest son, but was chosen by the people, perhaps because they saw in him the best hope for continuing his father's policies. However, this hope was quickly dashed. Jehoahaz reigned for only 3 months before Pharaoh Necho, returning from his campaign in the north, asserted his authority over Judah. The Bible's assessment of Jehoahaz is blunt. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his predecessors had done. 2 Kings 23, verse 32. This rapid return to evil ways, so soon after Josiah's reforms, suggests that the spiritual renewal under Josiah had not penetrated deeply into the hearts of the people or the royal court. Necho deposed Jehoahaz and took him captive to Egypt, where he would later die. In his place, Necho installed Jehoahaz's older brother, Eliakim, changing his name to Jehoiakim. This marked the beginning of Judah's subservience to Egypt. The Bible records that Necho imposed a heavy tribute on Judah, which Jehoiakim extracted from the people through taxation. Jehoiakim's reign of 11 years was characterized by moral and spiritual decline. The prophet Jeremiah, who had supported Josiah's reforms, now found himself in conflict with the new king. Jeremiah 22 contains a scathing indictment of Jehoiakim's rule, accusing him of injustice, oppression, and self-indulgence. The king even went so far as to burn a scroll of Jeremiah's prophecies, demonstrating his contempt for God's word. During Jehoiakim's reign, the balance of power in the region shifted again. In 605 BC, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar defeated the Egyptians at Carchemish, establishing themselves as the dominant power. Judah now found itself caught between these great powers, with Jehoiakim vacillating in his allegiances. Jehoiakim initially submitted to Babylonian rule, but later rebelled, leading to Nebuchadnezzar's first invasion of Judah in 597 BC. Jehoiakim died during this period, possibly assassinated, and was succeeded by his son, Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim's reign was even shorter than that of Jehoahaz, lasting only 3 months before he surrendered to the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar took Jehoiakim, the royal family, and many of Judah's skilled workers and nobles into exile in Babylon. This marked the first stage of the Babylonian exile. In place of Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar installed Mattaniah, Josiah's youngest son, as a puppet king, changing his name to Zedekiah. Despite witnessing the consequences of rebellion against Babylon, Zedekiah eventually also rebelled, leading to the final destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC, the razing of the temple, and the exile of most of the remaining population. This rapid succession of kings and the repeated pattern of rebellion and judgment stand in stark contrast to the stability and righteousness of Josiah's reign. Several factors contributed to this swift decline. 1. External pressures. Judah was caught in the power struggle between Egypt and Babylon, making independent action difficult. 2. Internal corruption. Josiah's reforms, while extensive, had not fully eradicated the corrupt practices and idolatrous tendencies within Judean society. 3. Weak leadership. None of Josiah's successors demonstrated his commitment to God or his leadership abilities. 4. Economic strain. The tribute demanded by Egypt and later Babylon placed a heavy burden on the nation. 5. Spiritual superficiality. The prophets, particularly Jeremiah, indicate that much of the reform under Josiah had been superficial, not penetrating to the heart level of the people. The tragic irony is that the very things Josiah had worked so hard to prevent, idolatry, injustice, and disregard for God's law, quickly reasserted themselves after his death. This rapid reversal underscores the limitations of top-down reform and the need for genuine heart change among the people. The period following Josiah's death serves as a somber epilogue to his story, highlighting the transient nature of human efforts at reform when not accompanied by deep spiritual transformation. It reminds us that lasting change requires more than just good leadership. It necessitates a genuine commitment to God's ways at all levels of society. As we reflect on this period of Judah's history, we're challenged to consider the nature of true reform and the conditions necessary for lasting spiritual renewal. Josiah's reign stands as a bright moment in Israel's history, but the swift decline that followed serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of reform and the persistent human tendency towards unfaithfulness. Despite the rapid decline of Judah following Josiah's death, his legacy continued to exert a profound influence on Jewish faith and culture long after the Babylonian exile. The impact of his reforms and the spiritual revival he initiated would shape the development of Judaism in significant ways for generations to come. One of the most enduring aspects of Josiah's legacy was the renewed emphasis on the law of Moses. The rediscovery of the Book of the Law during his reign marked a turning point in Israel's religious history. This event not only drove Josiah's reforms, but also set in motion a process of scriptural preservation and study that would become central to Jewish identity. During the Babylonian exile and in the post-exilic period, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, gained an unprecedented level of importance in Jewish life. The experience of exile, stripped of their land and temple, led the Jewish people to cling to the scriptures as the core of their identity. This focus on the written word, which can be traced back to Josiah's reforms, became a defining characteristic of Judaism. The centralization of worship in Jerusalem, another key aspect of Josiah's reforms, also had long-lasting effects. Although the temple was destroyed, the idea of Jerusalem as the spiritual center of Jewish life persisted. This concept would play a crucial role in maintaining Jewish identity during the exile and would fuel the desire to return and rebuild Jerusalem after the exile. Josiah's celebration of the Passover, described in the Bible as unparalleled since the time of the Judges, set a standard for religious observance that would be remembered and aspired to in later generations. The emphasis on national religious gatherings and the meticulous observance of religious laws became hallmarks of post-exilic Judaism. The prophetic literature associated with Josiah's time, particularly the books of Jeremiah and Zephaniah, became important parts of the Jewish scriptural canon. These writings, which both supported Josiah's reforms and warned of impending judgment, provided spiritual guidance and hope during the exile and beyond. Josiah's personal example of righteousness and his wholehearted devotion to God became a model for future leaders and for individual piety. In later Jewish tradition, Josiah was remembered as one of the most righteous kings, often mentioned alongside David and Hezekiah. His story served as an inspiration for those seeking to live faithfully in challenging circumstances. The concept of national repentance and return to God, so central to Josiah's reforms, became a recurring theme in Jewish thought. The idea that wholehearted turning to God could avert disaster and bring blessing shaped Jewish responses to later crises and challenges. Josiah's reforms also contributed to the development of Jewish eschatological thought. The hope for a future restoration of Davidic kingship and a purified worship, which Josiah's reign had briefly realized, became part of Jewish messianic expectations. In the post-exilic period, leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah built upon the foundation laid by Josiah. Their efforts to re-establish Jewish life and practice in the land drew inspiration from Josiah's earlier reforms. The emphasis on public reading and explanation of the law, seen in Nehemiah 8, echoes Josiah's public reading of the recovered Book of the Law. The development of synagogues as local centers of worship and study can be seen as an outgrowth of the decentralized study of the law that likely began under Josiah. While the temple remained the ideal center of worship, the practice of local gathering for prayer and scripture study, which became crucial during the exile, has roots in the renewed focus on the law during Josiah's time. Josiah's legacy also influenced the development of Jewish wisdom literature. The Book of Proverbs, which may have been compiled in its final form around this time, reflects the ethos of Josiah's reign with its emphasis on righteousness, wisdom, and the fear of the Lord. Even in later periods, such as the Maccabean Revolt in the 2nd century BC, leaders drew inspiration from Josiah's example of religious reform and resistance to foreign religious influence. His story provided a model for how to pursue religious purity and national renewal in the face of external pressures. In Christian tradition, Josiah's reforms prefigured aspects of Jesus' ministry, particularly the cleansing of the temple and the call to return to the true worship of God. Early Christian writers often pointed to Josiah as an example of godly leadership and zeal for righteousness. The enduring legacy of Josiah demonstrates how a single life, lived in devotion to God and in pursuit of righteousness, can have ripple effects far beyond its immediate context. Although his reforms did not prevent the Babylonian exile, they provided a spiritual reservoir from which later generations could draw. Josiah's story continues to challenge and inspire. It reminds us of the potential impact of godly leadership, the importance of returning to foundational truths, and the enduring power of sincere devotion to God. As we reflect on Josiah's legacy, we're invited to consider our own potential to influence future generations through faithful living and courageous action in our own time. The story of Josiah, though anchored in ancient history, resonates with striking relevance for our modern world. his life and reign offer profound lessons for contemporary leadership, social reform, and personal spiritual growth. As we reflect on Josiah's legacy, several key lessons emerge that can guide and inspire us today. 1. The power of youth leadership. Josiah's ascension to the throne at 8 and his initiation of reforms at 16 remind us not to underestimate the potential of young leaders. In our current global context, where youth activism is increasingly prominent in areas like climate change and social justice, Josiah's story encourages us to take young voices seriously and to create spaces for young people to lead and influence positive change. 2. The importance of rediscovering foundational truths. The rediscovery of the Book of the Law was a pivotal moment in Josiah's reign. This event underscores the importance of returning to foundational principles and values, especially in times of moral or social crisis. In our era of rapid technological and social change, Josiah's example challenges us to periodically reassess our core values and ensure that our actions align with our fundamental beliefs. 3. The need for comprehensive reform. Josiah's reforms were not limited to religious practices, but extended to social, economic, and cultural spheres. This holistic approach to reform reminds modern leaders that effective change often requires addressing multiple interconnected issues. Whether in government, business, or community organizations, leaders should consider the broader implications and connections of their reform efforts. 4. The challenge of institutional versus personal change. While Josiah's reforms were extensive, the rapid reversal after his death reveals the challenges of instituting lasting change. This aspect of Josiah's story highlights the need for reforms to be internalized at a personal level, not just instituted from the top down. It challenges us to consider how we can promote genuine heart change alongside structural reforms in our societies. 5. The role of spiritual renewal in social reform. Josiah's reforms were rooted in spiritual renewal. This connection between spiritual vitality and social justice offers a powerful model for faith-based activism and social engagement. It challenges religious communities to consider how their spiritual convictions should shape their involvement in social and political issues. 6. The importance of ethical leadership. In an age where leadership scandals are commonplace, Josiah's integrity and commitment to righteousness offer a compelling model of ethical leadership. His story challenges leaders in all sectors to prioritize moral integrity and to lead by example. 7. The value of cultural preservation and renewal. Josiah's efforts to restore traditional worship practices and purge foreign influences speak to the modern challenges of cultural preservation in a globalized world. His approach offers insights into how societies can maintain their cultural heritage while adapting to changing times. 8. The danger of geopolitical miscalculations. Josiah's tragic death resulting from his intervention in the conflict between Egypt and Babylon serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of international relations. It reminds modern leaders of the potential consequences of geopolitical miscalculations and the importance of careful diplomacy. 9. The impact of individual action. Despite the ultimate fate of Judah, Josiah's individual commitment to righteousness had a lasting impact. This aspect of his story encourages individuals today that their actions and choices matter, even in the face of larger societal trends. 10. The need for continual renewal. The cycle of reform and decline in Judah's history highlights the need for continual renewal and vigilance in maintaining positive changes. This lesson applies to personal spiritual growth, organizational management, and societal reform efforts. Applying Josiah's principles today. In education, encouraging critical thinking and ethical reasoning, helping students rediscover and engage with foundational texts and ideas. In governance, promoting transparency, ethical leadership, and comprehensive approaches to societal issues. In business, emphasizing corporate social responsibility and ethical business practices. In community development, encouraging grassroots involvement in reform efforts and promoting programs that address both spiritual and material needs. In personal growth, inspiring individuals to periodically reassess their values and commitments and to courageously act on their convictions. Josiah's story challenges us to be reformers in our own contexts, to lead with integrity, to value our cultural and spiritual heritage, and to work for comprehensive positive change in our societies. It reminds us that while the challenges we face may be significant, individual commitment to righteousness and truth can have a lasting impact far beyond our immediate circumstances. As we face the complex challenges of our modern world, the ancient wisdom embodied in Josiah's reign continues to offer guidance, inspiration, and hope for those who seek to make a positive difference in their world. In the depths of our mistakes and the shadows of our past, there lies a transformative power, the power of redemption. Josiah's story reminds us that it's never too late to turn towards the light, to seek forgiveness, and to forge a new path. Like Judah under Josiah's predecessors, we may find ourselves lost, having strayed far from our true purpose and values. But Josiah's example teaches us that even in the darkest times, a single heart turned towards righteousness can ignite a flame of change. Forgiveness isn't just about erasing the past, it's about reclaiming our future. When Josiah rediscovered the book of the law, he didn't just lament the years of transgression, he acted. He sought forgiveness and worked tirelessly to right the wrongs of generations. In our own lives, we may feel the weight of past mistakes, the burden of broken relationships, or the guilt of straying from our principles. But remember, just as Josiah's reforms brought renewal to a nation, your choice to seek forgiveness and make amends can bring healing to your world. The path of redemption isn't always easy. It requires humility to acknowledge our faults, courage to face the consequences, and determination to walk a new path. But in this journey lies the promise of freedom. Freedom from the chains of guilt, freedom to live authentically, and freedom to create a legacy of love and integrity. Whether you're seeking forgiveness or offering it, remember that each act of redemption ripples out, touching lives beyond our knowing. Like Josiah, whose reforms influenced generations long after his time, your choice to embrace forgiveness and redemption today can shape a brighter tomorrow for yourself and those around you. In the end, Josiah's story teaches us that it's not the mistakes of our past that define us, but the choices we make today. So choose forgiveness, choose redemption, choose to write a new chapter in your story, one of healing, growth, and renewed purpose. The power to change, to forgive, and to be forgiven lies within you. Embrace it and watch as it transforms not just your life, but the world around you. As we conclude our journey through the remarkable life of King Josiah, we're left with a profound sense of the enduring power of faith, courage, and principled leadership. Josiah's story, though separated from us by millennia, continues to resonate with striking relevance in our modern world. From his ascension to the throne as a young boy to his untimely death on the battlefield, Josiah's life was characterized by an unwavering commitment to righteousness and a passionate pursuit of reform. His discovery of the Book of the Law and subsequent national renewal serve as a timeless testament to the transformative power of rediscovering foundational truths. Josiah's reign reminds us that age is no barrier to leadership, and that even in the darkest of times, one individual's dedication to truth and justice can ignite a spark of change that impacts an entire nation. His comprehensive reforms, touching religious, social, and economic spheres, offer a model for holistic approaches to societal transformation that remains relevant today. Yet the tragic end of Josiah's reign and the swift decline of Judah after his death also serve as a sobering reminder of the fragility of human endeavors and the need for deep, lasting change that goes beyond surface-level reforms. It challenges us to consider how we can foster genuine, heart-level transformation in our own lives and societies. As we reflect on Josiah's legacy, we're invited to examine our own lives and the roles we play in our communities. What are the lost books in our own contexts, the forgotten truths or neglected values that, if rediscovered, could drive positive change? How can we, like Josiah, courageously stand for what is right, even when it means challenging the status quo? In our era of complex global challenges, Josiah's story encourages us to believe in the potential for renewal and reform. It reminds us that even small acts of faithfulness and courage can have far-reaching consequences, shaping not just our present, but the future of generations to come. As we close this chapter, I invite you to carry the spirit of Josiah into your own life. Consider the reforms needed in your personal world, your community, or your nation. Reflect on the foundational truths that guide you and how you might renew your commitment to them. Like Josiah, may we all strive to lead with integrity, to pursue justice, and to be catalysts for positive change in our spheres of influence. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How does Josiah's story resonate with you? What lessons do you find most applicable to your life or our current world? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your insights might just inspire others on their own journeys of faith and leadership. And if you found value in this exploration of Josiah's life, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone you think might benefit from this powerful story of reform and renewal. Your share could be the spark that ignites someone else's journey of discovery and transformation. Lastly, if you want to continue exploring fascinating stories like this one that challenge and inspire us on our faith journeys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. By doing so, you'll ensure you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, where we'll continue to uncover the rich lessons hidden within the pages of the Bible. Remember, just as Josiah's legacy continued long after his lifetime, the impact of your faith and actions can extend far beyond what you might imagine. Let's commit together to living lives of courage, integrity, and purpose, inspired by the timeless example of King Josiah. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the Bible's most inspiring stories. Until next time, may you be empowered to be a force for positive change in your world, just as Josiah was in his.